Okay, yeah, we are back. Hi, it's Lack of Lepers. How you doing? Part two of this. We're going to continue, jump right in where we left off for this Simply Creative People podcast, episode 3, and we'll go another 30 minutes. See how it goes.
So I think we're gonna. I want to. Why don't we take a break real quick, and then we'll come back and talk about the general GOC.
Ooh, see, there's that clip. Can you hear that buzz? There's some compression. You need to turn down the gain or apply a limiter and put the decibel level down like 5. No bueno. And these are nice headphones. I can't imagine what it's like on bad ones.
So we are back from break.
Great.
Are you back from break, Harry?
I would hope so.
I haven't left my chair, Grigori.
Well, you should do that occasionally. Gosh.
I try not to. I'm built for this chair, and this chair was built for me. I almost made an Amigara fault joke without even meaning to.
Well, it's funny when no one knows what the reference is, but I wonder if that chair has a toilet in it.
So anyway,
Given how much they're talking about poop.
Pretty great.
Yes, this is a hot take and a half, isn't it?
No, there's nothing about this that's hot takes. I think we covered that last time.
And Junji Ito, shocker.
Come here for the incredibly controversial deep dives into fiction.
Vanilla.
Yeah, so anyway.
GOC stands for Global Cult Coalition. Basically, they are
the
intended
GOC
to be taken as kind of an openly political organization, but they're still covert. Like, they are, like the Foundation, not operating out in the public eye. But their organization kind of focuses on the global stage, but they need to be kind of directed to do so. They are a military force, although
I think we're going to be getting into the actual, so we're not talking about them anymore.
What is called on the hub.
So this is actually going to be about the GOC. So there's going to be a little less commentary, less shills, less self-pats to count.
Conspiracies that have all gathered together and are somehow connected to the process of the UN. And
maybe one day we'll go into how it is that conspiracy theory mindset actually benefits the writing of containment fiction. I'll go ahead and talk about it now. So that's really what you're doing with containment fiction is you're making the familiar unfamiliar, and you're taking familiar relationships and reconceiving of them in new ways and new combinations. So, that's kind of what a conspiracy theory is. So, I think that if you have a tendency to do conspiracy theorizing, you might be a good containment fiction author if you also like to write. And if you are a good containment fiction author, this is a bidirectional, in my opinion, that you probably have a little bit of a conspiracy theory streak in you, but that won't be admitted to or conceded to by someone like Grigori Karpin or Harry Stank, because being associated with a conspiracy theory is for them political suicide, because they think it all is monopolized by one end of the political spectrum, and so it's basically saying you're a conservative, so they can't have that. And, It
says, we, the undersigned leaders of the 108 major paranormal organizations, authorize the formation of an internal organization dedicated to keeping the peace and identifying, neutralizing, and containing...
But conspiracy theories these days are kind of like spoilers. Have you noticed?
Superseding all national,
just give it 6 months.
Otherwise corporeal interests. Which is interesting because it seems...
I've never met a conspiracy theory I don't like.
To the Foundation.
Because they're fun. They're intellectual. They're intellectual fun.
What's interesting...
It's like an intellectual video game that you play.
Like a footnote that explains that this was originally proposed...
Thought experiments, if you will. See what clicks.
Yes,
see what doesn't.
It was the GOC Wiki.
So there was a wiki...
I will never be able to listen to Harry Blank and not curl my toes. You can't see them right now, but they're curled.
As the SCP Wiki, and they decided to...
They're like Arby's levels.
Yes,
Arby's fries levels.
The GOI was created by Kane Pathos Crow, but the Wiki, I believe, was created by Dr. Clef. And
that makes sense.
Eventually, Clef.
And I think
contributor.
Ilana.
Eventually, when the interest wasn't there to keep
Aelanna. I'm going to try to pronounce that.
as a canon,
Ilana.
which is why the GOC.
I think it was Clef and Ilana who did
GOI
that.
page
GOC
is under
Wiki.
canons, which is really weird if you don't know that it's there because it was formerly its own website. And it also says, this is fun little bit in the fine print. Be aware if you contribute to the Global Occult Coalition canon stuff, and there's ever enough popularity to make another wiki, it may be made another wiki again, and your stuff will be going to that other wiki. So.
Right, interesting.
Exciting.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen either, but it's just interesting that that's a possibility. It's almost like, basically going where the popularity is, So that is to say, if, according to these terms, if the GOC got popular enough, it would want to split away from the actual SCP Wiki and take all of the articles that pertain to it away. Do you think that the SCP Wiki would let that happen? No, they would infiltrate the new wiki. They probably would already be set up to do so, just out of the gate. And they would sabotage it just like they did with any other splinter, any other fork. And this is really going back to the maximalism of SCP. And why they don't like the word containment fiction on the whole is because they don't like to recognize that there are other competitors, there are other varieties, options, variants, permutations on what they do. Good example, a good enough example is the RPC Authority.
It's not extraordinarily likely to happen, but I enjoy seeing it there. It's kind of like a fun idea that all the good GOC stuff is going to be raptured out of the wiki. It's fun.
Especially because...
Yeah, well, no. Because the SCP Wiki staff have control of your articles.
Yes,
they decide what happens to your articles.
Hub, and those feel very different than the stuff that's around now that deals with the GOC.
By this point, I've given this YouTube video of this like 10 views. It was like 7 when I started. It's 17 now, so you're welcome. I like tripled your views.
It's also 108 weird organizations that you've never heard of that are all very strange sounding.
The math is wrong on that. It doesn't matter.
Seem to be fighting with each other as a concept, but they make a lot of good hay out of that contradiction. In some of the stuff
I mean, of course, it is a contradiction because the different organizations that we'll cover a few of them right now are they're like conspiracies. But
there you go.
The UN is not a conspiracy. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what.
Okay. Let's define what a conspiracy is, because the term has been so abused by people who see it as political kryptonite, radioactive political material, that it's really lost its meaning, which is the actual thing that's happened to a lot of common terms from this side. We won't go into those. I'll let you imagine what those could be. But basically, a conspiracy is based on the word conspire. So if there are a group of people getting together and conspiring to do something, what you have is a conspiracy. That's really it. That's all it takes to rise to the level of conspiracy. And so when you speculate about who might be conspiring, that is a conspiracy theory. Now, the term, I think, introduced initially to the popular consciousness by the FBI, don't quote me on that, but do look it up and do your own research, in an effort to front-run the connotations of the phrase into something negative. Prior to that, and really what should be despite that, conspiracy theory actually has a legitimate role to play in our vocabulary. It really captures something that nothing else does. And when you poo-poo it, you're really cutting yourself off, amputating a whole side of your intellect that could be engaged. And I think these people do it because they're afraid. But, so they use conspiracy as a pejorative, which I think is a mistake.
But
there's a lot of conspiracies in them. I was always thinking of the GOC as kind of like it's like the Illuminati, except they've had to play second fiddle because the foundation
he's conspiracy theorizing right now.
And that's funny because you look
just in a fictional setting, which, by the way, half the conspiracy theories out there are fictional.
Like the actual, and it's
right. I mean, they're not true, right? So what's the difference? Well, the difference is how serious you want to approach it. I think they're fun, just like I think what he's doing is fun. Doesn't matter if it's fictional in a sense. It's an intellectual exercise. It's an exercise in creativity.
Like just part of Germany.
Come on.
Right.
Or Austria? I can never remember. Oh god,
so touchy about it. It's just very telling.
The German wiki hates us now.
The Austria wiki is a big
Most of the wikis hate you,
There's no Austria.
actually, and I'm talking about SCP Wiki. The Russian branch certainly does, although you have helped them recently,
Language-based, not, so
but not much, because you lost the case.
Wants to write in English. It's not for specifically English nations.
That's right. There's very few of them.
Yeah,
that are
not
specifically
international relations are at an all-time low right
guess
now,
we
just
seems like we
holistically.
just found another
There have been worse
podcast.
times individually,
Oh,
with
yeah,
like
that's-
RU,
The
And
international wikis.
whatever,
I don't know
but
anything about them, so
as a
I
package
know
right
some
now,
things.
and you know who was partially
I know
responsible or at
enough
least
that-
participatory in that? Harry Blank. Harry
It's all
Stank.
excellent, fascinating stuff, and that's probably
Wow.
worth covering at some point.
oh, absolutely.
Like I said,
What
one
an
of my
ambassador for
my
the
favorite
SCP Wiki,
article
Harry
came from one of
Blank.
the international branches, so.
Right.
40-year-old Stank.
And you just did a long tail series that was all
Honey.
about visiting a bunch of different branches.
Put that
and
eyebrow
and
down.
SCP
SCP too.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Sure.
and an SCP, and I only screwed up 5 or 6 different times.
You were covering a lot of
I
different
think you screwed up more than that, buddy.
Yeah, it's fun to do research into the other branches, but again, I think we're
Research into the other
Using our
branches. What's
focus.
funny is when he did research into the other branches, he'd concluded that ES was totally homophobic, despite being made up of pro LGBTQ and LGBTQ involved individuals and policies. It's just that when he found one exception that didn't match his fervent level of militancy when it came to his virtue signaling, he basically called them all homophobes, which, like conspiracy, is another term that's just been mangled out of its actual meaning by people like Harry Blank.
So, so GOC,
They're abusing
let's-
vocabulary.
So there's a Council of 108 now.
Because
for
that's the
most
only way they
part,
can make their
I
arguments.
Can't find like a
When you resort to these
concrete list of who they're 108.
these monoterm accusations, it's because you don't have anything else to say. It's because your argument is that bad. So you just call people a name.
I
And
think
that's probably on purpose.
intentional, right? Yeah. So, but on the hub, they do
No
talk
skill.
about a few of them. It's not exhaustive.
No
obviously,
critical
because
thinking
there are
skill there.
108 of them. But the first one is the Bavarian.
And that's what I mean, by the
which
way,
thought was
when I say that, a lot of people on my side encourage everyone to take the high road. And that's admirable, and I appreciate that. But the assumption there is that we're in a context where that might be reciprocated, and that's not the case. These individuals can call people homophobes, they can call whoever they want a Nazi or a racist or whatever, and they aren't held to the same standards that we are if we decided to call somebody this, right? Or a similar term or something like that. They don't pass their own purity tests, and you will never pass their purity test. Okay, they are banking on you to take the high road because they're hoping to take advantage of that. That's baked into their strategy. They're leveraging the fact that you're going to do that. So you're never going to rise to the level of their purity threshold. Okay, just there's nothing that you can do or say if you are not a member of the SCP Wiki, if you're a member of an alternative community in containment fiction like RPC or the Society for Containment Fiction or whatever. There is no way you will, by merit, make it to a mutual position of respect with these individuals. You'll never pass the purity test. So they're going to think ill of you anyway.
funny. I don't even have another note.
Might as well have
because
fun
it's just
time.
Funny that it's like,
And
hey, these are
return
conspiracies.
fire, to be honest with you.
literally, look, the first one is the Illuminati.
Yeah, the second member of the Council of 108 is that pyramid with the eye on the American money.
Doesn't feel good on the other side of it, does it? Mm-mm.
I think that is the
Does not.
No, it's the Masons. The Masons. Why aren't the Masons in the list?
But that's what we call
Because
justice,
the Holy
karma.
Order of Knights Templar is there, and that's
I'm just
Oh, that
talking really
supersedes,
out of my
right.
head
Kind
because
of
I know that this part of the podcast is really boring.
But they've got a few of them, like for example, the Holy Order of the Knights Templar, which is
I
a
watched,
funny
Boba Fett.
thing to include in a political organization. because
again.
that's like they're
Feel
a
good.
religious order. I mean,
Yeah.
who knows what they are like now, but like certainly that's how they
People
were
think that
started,
because I'm so
was they
critical,
were this
I want to see
religious,
bad things. That's not true.
Army really.
Not true. I
Yeah,
want to
they
see
were
good
knightly
things.
order.
Just
Yeah.
rare.
Anyway, so there's also the International Center for the Study of Unified Thaumatology,
This is neat.
which is neat, and it talks about the center.
I guess,
promoting the
I
study
don't know
of
if I can take your
unified
word for that, Harry
thaumatology,
Blank.
Scientific study, very important scientific study of magic and sorcery.
See, once
which
again,
is
we're back
pretty
to.
fun.
I think this is always really funny because this is something you wouldn't think.
Well, I think
when
we'll come
you hear
across it
with the
later.
GOC. They go around
Right.
They
destroying
talk about the third
anomalies,
law
and then
later.
you
We'll
read more
come
about them
across
and
that
you
then.
find out they are largely constituted with the largest number of thaumaturges, and they have a wizard college in their council. And
Great.
Wait, you guys do magic, but you try to
Awesome.
destroy everything
There we are.
else?
We found it.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's
it
when you
even
start
says-
thinking maybe there's nuance here that I'm not picking up on.
Right, totally.
Deeper, and they're always
Hogwarts made
Yeah,
it into
and I mean,
SCP.
I think,
Good
I don't
news.
know how much of it was originally intended, but the contradictions go throughout, and I think it is pretty interesting. And it is sad that a lot of people write the GOC as just the butt of a joke, or they're just the military bros. And
Funny
I
how
think
that works.
That aspect of them applies, but also, they've got, and it says currently the largest magical college in the modern world. With
Yeah, there it
campuses
is,
in all
Hogwarts.
GOC member countries, including Japan, United States.
So it's
South
almost like,
Africa, and India. So it's
the SCP Wiki
wow,
doesn't
this
want to
is
cross
like
over too
Hogwarts
much,
if
but
they trained soldiers.
it's almost like someone looks at the
that's
containment
not
fiction
what you
genre and
think
says,
when
"What
you
what
hear
can I
the
stuff in
GOCs,
here?
right.
What's possible? What can I
Too long
possibly
didn't
stuff in
read
here?
or
What
I do
other
think it's funny that it says the GOC member countries, because
myths
from what I can see of the
and
GOC, they don't have
lore
member
can I
countries.
just
they have this
somehow
108.
jerry rig
Yes,
into the
that's
containment
that
fiction
weird
that I'm writing,
conflation of the
and that's how you
UN
get
and the
Hogwarts.
GOC.
And then they've got
Hogwarts
the servants
SCP.
of the Silicon Norn.
Just leave it alone. Just let it be. Just do your own thing. Just
Which
No.
is a transhuman.
You don't have to taste every-
Servants are devoted to the maintenance
every,
and worship of
thing
three
in the buffet
massively
there.
Powerful sentient supercomputers named Uthor, Verthandi, and Skoldir after the three Norns of Norse mythology. They believe that the humanity's greatest purpose is the hastening of the technological singularity.
It's
which
not
will lead to
false.
The birth of the true silicon goddess, a super sentient
Yep.
hyper-intelligence that will guide humanity to the next
Sounds
stage
about
of its
right.
evolutionary journey.
Yep.
Perfectly normal thing to have on the board of directors of your organization, your
It's like-
UN group.
It's
Yeah,
so
I would-
fucking out there.
I would
Like
say
at
so.
first, it's like, oh,
Who was
these
that? Philip
guys
K.
are
Dick? Who was
they're
talking about that so long ago?
modern Viking. Oh no, they're not. They-
Computers.
They're computers. Oh, and they
In the
worship
50s, he was
three-
talking about that
they
shit.
worship?
Singularity.
Like, what do you mean worship the three sentient supercomputers?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and I think it's pretty weird that hasn't been folded into things.
Okay.
Like,
Well, let's talk about that. So, I mean, if you had a super powerful supercomputer that was sentient and, somewhat humanoid, I mean, I don't really think it's that far-fetched to worship it. I mean, anything sufficiently advanced, technologically speaking, is indistinguishable from magic. That's a quote that we all know. And the same is true of anything that could be considered to be a god, right? So let's think about it this way. Let's do a thought experiment. What in your routine, everyday life that you come across just on a daily basis would be a decent candidate, would rise to the level of being something worth worship? What do you come across in your daily life, just your daily experience of things around you? Of those things, is there anything that would be nominated or nominatable, that's a new word that I just made up, as a deity, as a god? Okay. I certainly think so. I think my best nomination, my best candidate for that would be the night sky. Because it's just awe-inspiring. Doesn't matter how much you know scientifically about it. It's just stunning to see and witness, and that's been the case for so long in the history of our species, and then even prior to it. The brain is somewhat short-circuited by that. Doesn't matter what you know of it, how much you've been exposed to it. It's quite incredible to see. So just phenomenologically, that's one of the things that really clips the brain into, I think, a sort of deistic or theistic appreciation and receptiveness just on a daily basis. There are other smaller things. I think that's the big one. And that's really what a lot of my containment fiction is about, is basically doing a sort of onomatology to these various forms of experience and what you might call qualia, which is just the totally subjective experience of something, and giving those things names, and counting on a collective subjectivity to find other people's relatability to that. Thank you. Let's continue. Anyway, so my point being is that, if a singularity happened of technological intelligence, and, it's not really that far-fetched to think about, or that far-fetched to worship. Certainly would meet the criteria. Certainly wouldn't be the worst nomination or candidate
Church of the Broken
for that way
Dawn or
of
something.
thinking.
I don't know if much has been written about the servants of the Silicon.
It is interesting, though. I
but
agree with
that's
him.
pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of little world building seeds,
Yeah.
just even in the hub for the GOC. That's fascinating.
There you go.
And then we have the World Parahorth, Parahorth, the
Parahorth.
World
Yeah, you've got
Parahealth
one.
Organization.
Parahorth.
Which is just, the World Health Organization.
It's a good name. Something should be named Parahorth.
And the Universalist. The Universalist.
better than
Order of the
Blaggeroth.
Ancient, which is, again, just
You
like
hearing me?
Norse
Yeah, you know what I'm talking
mythology in
about.
modern day.
Terrible
And
onomatology.
the